Le Mans Ultimate just had a micro update, bringing some bops, some adjustments and general improvement. Good job, LMU developers. However, in this video, what I want to discuss are what I believe to be the things that are currently really holding back this racing simulator. In the background, we have some glorious GTE racing at Sebring. Fantastic race, lots of carnage, and the GTE cars are actually really quite fun. I'd like to see even more racing with them. Even though in the past I was a bit critical of them, I actually quite enjoyed this Porsche. Remember, to have the power to unsubscribe, you have to be a subscriber first, so subscribe so you can then unsubscribe. Clicking the like button is about as effective as flashing your lights in a race to make the car in front move out the way, but you can try clicking it anyway. And of course, a huge thanks to all our Patreon members, channel members, subscribers on Twitch, and everyone that financially supports us. It's all your fault, you can't blame me. I'm going to lay it out, and this is going to be deeply traumatic for many people watching this video, and I'm not going to apologise for it. The biggest thing that Le Mans Ultimate really needs to sort out is the simulator's force feedback. Now, to be clear, it's not the worst force feedback in the world as it is right now. You can use it to drive the car, to catch the rear, you can feel the road texture, you can feel flat spots, you can feel curbing. In fact, you can feel suspension stuff way too strongly. It's a weird quirk of R Factor 2. If you like a rattling wheel and over-the-top suspension noise, well, you'll love it. And lots of people that are complete noobs when it comes to force feedback will latch onto those things and be like, oh, this is the best force feedback ever, what are you talking about? The thing that's a problem with Le Mans Ultimate's force feedback is when it comes to useful tyre slip and grip feel, the transient range of load through the force feedback that describes whether or not you're about to understeer or oversteer, or when you're balancing at the limit when you're in slip, it is effectively non-existent or very mild, unless you're driving the high downforce car at high speed, in which case the type of slide you do is totally predictable and super easy to deal with anyway, and very obvious what you should be doing that's quick and slow. But, you know, for the most part, if you're driving slowly or you're in a situation where you really are just trying to balance the grip finely, the force feedback just does not have the dynamic range describing what's happening with the vehicle. Now, fortunately, Le Mans Ultimate does have very controllable cars and a really forgiving tyre model, so you can see the visual slip and you can drive from the visuals, and you do have a good load up of force feedback before you go into the slip state. But once you're like trail braking and rotating the rear subtly or trying to balance the understeer of the front, it's basically a flatline signal. And this is on a 21 Nm DD wheel with all the filters totally removed. On top of that, as I say, you have really over the top flat spotting feeling coming through the wheel, track bumps and suspension stuff, which actually makes it even harder to feel the pertinent information to actually drive from. Particularly where this will be a real problem is people that are playing on Logitech G293 wheels or wheelbases like a T300 and lower end wheels, because those wheels will not only be overwhelmed by the bumps and jolts, they will particularly struggle to pick up any dynamic range, even though it's massively lacking. But whatever dynamic range there is there, those wheelbases just won't be able to pick it up because it's just so muddy and hidden and then in a mess of vibration and noise. So at the moment, people on those lower end wheels are really suffering with LMU. But as I say, even if you play on a super high end DD wheel, 21 Nm DD wheel with all the filters off, it still lacks that range of load that describes the grip of the tyres when you're balancing at the limit. So ideally, absolutely ideally, would be for Le Mans Ultimate developers, Motorsport Games, to really hunker down and address this underlying force feedback. However, the reality is Le Mans Ultimate's force feedback is usable in its current state, and it is better than sims like ACC, which many people thought had perfectly fine force feedback, even though it patently didn't if you understand how you can drive from force feedback. But a lot of people thought ACC was fine, and if LMU's better, well, then why is the developer going to bother spending the time and effort on improving it? It really doesn't make sense from a business case. It would make more sense for them to work on other things that more consumers are probably going to pay more attention to. It's just unfortunately how the world works. So what would be incredible is if someone can take Marvin's awesome iRacing app, Mirror, which is basically like a IRFFB type app. It basically takes telemetry from the game and then generates force feedback for that. But if someone could take Marvin's app, or maybe if Marvin could do it as himself, just please do work for us for free. But if someone can do that for LMU, that would be absolutely bloody superb. Because if you haven't used it, we'll just call it Marvin's force feedback app for iRacing, Mirror. It is by far the best way that anyone has developed for you to adjust force feedback with a racing simulator. You can choose how much the signal's filtered, you can dial in the strength of the signal, it saves it per car perfectly. You can also add in a oversteer effect so that the wheel can load up when the rear of the car rotates. You can have understeer effects, you can choose if that's a load, a vibration. You can just choose what you want, but even if you don't use any additional effects or anything else, in terms of just the raw force feedback signal, you can absolutely dial it in and maximize the detail that's coming out of the simulator to as best as you ever possibly could. So much so, using Marvin's app Mirror with iRacing, you can get iRacing to actually feel really, really quite good. Unfortunately, that ends up highlighting the massive tyre model issues that iRacing has, where the tyre's grip just disappears and doesn't come back. But at least it tells you exactly what's going on. You can really feel what's happening with the simulator using that app. It's superb. So we desperately need someone to do that for LMU, because as I say, I really don't think the developers of LMU have the time or probably the will to actually address this simulator's force feedback. And for those of you wondering, on the grand scheme of where force feedback is in LMU compared to other titles, I would say it's basically slightly better than ACC, but that's about it really. Mirror with iRacing is much better. Race Room, the force feedback is worlds better. Race Room's quite muted force feedback and quite a lot built-in damper. Probably not that good on lower-end wheels, but it has way more detail, and especially at low speed, and less stupid noise. So Race Room's got much better force feedback from a detail perspective. AC1 has some over-the-top stuff. It can be ridiculous a bit, but it has detail and information there. Again, that's just on another level to LMU. It's worth saying, a lot of people are confused with force feedback and they derail the force feedback conversation. It's very tedious and tiresome. The fact is, enjoyment of force feedback is subjective, and what you like or don't like about force feedback in various simulators is subjective. However, simulators themselves, with the different force feedback implementations, have objectively more or less detailed force feedback that objectively gives you more or less detail for specific things. So you can objectively say that Mirror, Marvin's app, gives you more information for tyre grip levels or oversteer, if you're using the oversteer option it has on it. It's objectively different. You might not like it, but it's objectively a fact that has more detailed force feedback. Or AC1 objectively has more dynamic range and as a result more detailed force feedback than ACC, for example. It might be because the tyre model and the physics are different as well, and that's what generates the force feedback. But the key thing to take away from this, which for some reason this comes up repeatedly whenever we bring up force feedback, there's a difference between what you enjoy and what you like and dislike. That's subjective, and what is objectively different. If a game was black and white versus a colour game, it would be objectively a different colour. It would have objectively different detail or less detail in a black and white game than a colour game, right? So that's not subjective. You might subjectively prefer a black and white game because it looks like a vintage film or something. But there we go, right. Just, I know that's tedious and so dumb to explain, but by God, we're going to get the same comments because we've had decades of this stupidity surrounding force feedback. So we need Marvin to fix this game's force feedback, basically, and it would really transform it in its force feedback. So the force feedback, bloody hell, got through that quickly, is a massive thing with this simulator. Now, I know another thing that I would really like to see, and I think people that have been on the early access of this title desperately wanting a few more tracks. They've confirmed some more tracks are coming out. And I think Silverstone in particular will be particularly entertaining. But I also would petition them to remove Qatar. Just get rid of it. Circuit of the Americas. Dump it in the dustbin. I hate that track. Put Road America in instead. There you go. Much better. No, Circuit of the Americas is actually a really good track. I've just not learnt it, so I hate it. It's one of those tracks you have to learn to appreciate. Paul Ricard's like that, Silverstone's like that, Nordschleif's like that. You know, you have to learn them to enjoy them. There's so many corners. They're a chore to learn. I'll do my homework and we will learn it. But yeah, there's new tracks coming out anyway, so it's not really worth commenting on. But I think a lot of people desperately would like that. And so is the next one, guys, of what I'd really like to see in this, and what I think they need to do. They need to run more events with larger grids. So even if it's like their sort of hourly races, I would like them to up the grid numbers a bit more, or have more options with larger grids. I know that they want to keep the weekend events and other events, the special events, special, and so, you know, having them be the larger grid races keeps them special. I think they should still do that. But I think where you've got races at the moment, like this GT, where I think it was limited to 23 cars, for maybe the GTE only, make that a 50-car race or a 40-car race. I don't know. But you know, because it's so much fun doing big grid races. And even if it was a big grid sprint race, it's a real missed thing to have that. And maybe that could be a justification to get the most out of GTE and to keep it as a special thing. Maybe it's like only 2 times a day or 1 time a day. But more big grid racing I would really like to see in this simulator where possible. Even with me being a full-time sim racing YouTuber, I last weekend I missed the longer races because I was too busy mostly dealing with an ear infection, but just doing other stuff, so I totally missed it. So I would like more opportunities, and I think a lot of other people probably would like that as well, because not everyone is free at the weekend specifically. I know they do have other events as well, but you know what I'm getting at. I think they could really leverage the big grid thing a bit more. Now, not an easy fix, but a very important one is there's still quite a bit of performance issues in terms of when it goes to night time and you've got a lot of headlights, or when it is larger grids. I'm asking for larger grids, but then it has some performance issues. Even when you turn the number of drivers down, there still could really do with being some underlying optimization for larger grids. And just in general, the game could really do with running better. Considering how it looks, it should run better. It should maybe use the GPU better. These are small things a developer can just sort out in a day, obviously. Maybe this performance stuff, if they do aim for a console version of the game, it will be something they'll inevitably have to work on more to get this to run well on a console. But I do think that should be obviously a massive priority and very welcoming. It does look nice, don't get me wrong. LMU looks fantastic, but it's mostly through them doing a really good job with the lighting settings, time of day, the texture work and the track models, car models. The artistry is fantastic in this, and I think that's doing a lot of the heavy lifting. I'm not worried about it looking better. It doesn't need to look better, but it really should run better. I need it to run better. I'm using a 5090 with an X3D chip, and I'm having some frame time, like stutter issues in certain situations. It shouldn't be occurring. This isn't Microsoft Flight Sim. This is a game based on a game engine from 2012. You know, it should ideally run better. So I think that should be a massive priority. Probably is a big priority. It's what I would really like to see. So not much. You know, there's not many things there really. And then because I don't want this video to be too long, and the biggest part of this video is the force feedback thing, so I think that's what's really holding this sim back. I think you can all agree with me on this. Here we go. None of you will disagree. Maybe you will. Let me know in the comments. But, right, modern GT and endurance cars, they're a bit rubbish, aren't they, guys? Let's be honest. Let's be real for a second here. Modern race cars are pretty crap. So, right, Le Mans Ultimate, they're going to do the European stuff, tracks and what have you. But can you guys, please, as quickly as possible, do a vintage car pack? Please. Please. Like GT1 maybe. I don't know. Lolas, whatever. I don't know. Some Caterhams, Radicals. Anything that, like, of just vintage 60s GT. I don't care. Please just do some kind of vintage GT stuff. I don't know if you guys watching this video, you might not have played it, but Project Cars 2, the vintage, they had some vintage endurance cars in that, and it was so fun driving vintage Le Mans with those vintage cars, and the racing you got is so good, and they're so much more compelling to drive than modern cars. So that's my thing, is that I really hope that they do a maybe for Christmas, please Motorsport Games, I would like Santa Claus to bring me for Christmas some vintage cars in Le Mans Ultimate. And, you know, Project Motor Racing is probably going to have vintage... Well, it is having vintage cars in it. So, that, you know, it'll be really interesting to have that contrast between those simulators. And we can go from one sim with vintage to another sim with vintage. It'll be a great time all over. So, vintage GT. You guys all know, you all agree with me, modern cars are absolute... I've got a beat button now. So that's it, guys. That's it for this video. Give me a teapot and a teacup and then another teapot if you got to this far in the video, and some kind of fish, or just give me a fish and a teapot. I'm not picky. As an emoji, by a comment. It's really handy for me to see when I read comments who's actually watched the video rather than just reacting to the thumbnail. So I appreciate that. But yeah, great job by Le Mans Ultimate for the update they did. It's obviously just a polish, but it was game changing. Got the echo eventually there. Great job by the developers. I'm loving what they're doing with this game, having great fun with it. Every time we jump in and drive it, we have good races, and that's all that you could want from a video game. Till the next one, guys. I obviously won this race with 2 minutes to go. It says 8th, but all the cars in front got DQ'd for being for cheating. True story. Would never tell fibs. Till the next one, guys. Thank you very much for watching. Happy tea drinking. Take care. And goodbye.